DreamGen is a music generation tool that has a very specific and narrow scope. So specific and narrow that I'm not really sure musicians will really get loads out of it. But if you're a non-musician but you want to muck about with dabbling with music that sounds quite psychedelic or melodic or meditative, then DreamGen might be for you to entice you and wet your whistle to go in for something else. But as I say, the scope for this tool is super, super narrow, and I'm delighted it exists, but I'm also like, who else is this for? DreamGen is a polyrhythm generator, and you find this quite often in African and Caribbean music quite a lot, and it's where you have two at least types of rhythms or melodies that start off together and then they diverge from each other, and that's because they're working to different time signatures, and slowly they'll kind of pull themselves apart and then come back together and converge, meet back so that they're back in sync, and then kind of move away and come back again. Quite often you see things like there might be something running at 5 beats in every 8 bars of music, or versus a 6 beats versus in every 8 bars of music, and they kind of chop across each other and then slowly resync, and that's really what DreamGen generates. You pick the type of time signature that you're looking for, and then what you can do is add in anything from 1 to 100 notes. You can change the beats per minute of what those notes are spinning around and doing, and you can change how quickly or slowly the rhythms and melodies diverge and reconverge again. And once you've done that and mucked about with the colours of the orbs flying around and added in some additional chords if you want them, you just press play and listen to what you've created. There's different sounds that you can create from, so bells, pianos, electric pianos, some kind of synthy, glistening things, and then you can muck around by adding on reverb, which makes it sound like it's almost like church bells ringing out in a really echoey hall, or you can add on some high and low pass filters, which means that they start to sound like they're coming through the radio or through water or quite distant out in space. And it does mean that although there's a very small sound set here, you can get quite a lot out of what's there, especially if you start mucking about with pitches and pitch shifting things as well. But once you've then got your polyrhythm ready to go, you just press play and watch it do its thing. And thankfully you can turn off all of the UI and have it in like a zen mode so that you can be psychedelic or relaxing and have it feeling like a proper Windows 98 screensaver. Or do you remember when you used to turn on all the visual effects when Windows Media Player was like a big thing, or Winamp? It's going back to that kind of era, and it does a good job because as each note kind of hits its central point, lots of particle effects can explode out of it, and you can muck about with just how crazy those particle effects can be. And that is quite satisfying, but that's all that this DreamGen does. Set out a couple of polyrhythms, listen to it do its beautiful thing, and that's it. A musician can then export this out to a MIDI file, although I ran into lots of problems doing that, and I'd really welcome DreamGen to have some additional documentation to walk you through the steps of how to do this properly, because it really seemed to be quite hit and miss for me. It might be because I get obsessed with trying to put 100 notes in things and then like either really speeding up the BPM and making the converge very slow so that it just sounds like it's a kaleidoscope of notes kind of going up and down like almost like a generative synth kind of going off doing its own thing. Maybe that's too much for the MIDI to deal with, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, outside of that, musicians will already have access to tools like this in a digital audio workstation, so it renders DreamGen pretty much redundant. And I think non-musicians will find this a fun oddity for a little while, but there's other musical tools that can kind of do bits of this, but in a much more structured musical way. And so I can only see this as a quirky, fun visualizer for music to help people understand how polyrhythms work in an educational sense, and then you'd want to move on to something else afterwards. However, I'm delighted it exists, and I still bought it, so clearly it's for someone. Written review will be over on higherplanegames.com. Take care. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network. a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/HigherPlaneNetwork. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.